Australian troops will be withdrawn from Afghanistan by September this year. The Prime Minister's announcement was sparked by US President Joe Biden's decision to announce a phased withdrawal. Joining me now live is former Pentagon advisor and a commander in the US Navy Reserve, Jason Israel. Jason, great to see you. Thank you for joining me. Firstly, this was a 20-year US presence in Afghanistan. Did the war achieve what it was set out to?
Thanks for having me, Danica, and thanks for always mentioning my Navy Reserve affiliation. As a reminder, as I'm not on duty, these views are my own. Great question to lead off with. Did the U.S. meet its goals? In the beginning, the U.S. goal was to remove Al-Qaeda and remove any threats to the U.S. It was argued that when Osama Bin Laden was killed and then when Al-Qaeda was pretty much removed from Afghanistan, that the U.S. achieved its goals then. However, throughout the last 20 years, the U.S. has redefined goals to try to help build Afghanistan to a functioning democracy, to try to reduce the Taliban's hold on certain parts of the territory. So by the self-defined goals that have come over the 20 years, not all of those goals have been met. And the singular question facing now is, will the Taliban be able to take hold of the government again within 2 or 3 years like it did before 2001? That's the big question, and that's kind of the big gamble here.
I want to get to the Taliban in a moment, but do you think that Australia gained anything from its involvement?
Well, let's go down the list, right? So first of all, we always appreciate, when we talk about in Washington, D.C., the strong mateship between U.S. and Australia, and this would continue the legacy of Australia fighting alongside its U.S. allies. So, of course, I have seen no other alliance strengthen, particularly over the last few years, than the U.S.-Australia one. So that's one. The second is, if Afghanistan could be stopped as an exporter of terrorism, as they said, whether or not Australia itself would be a likely target or the U.S., we always use the term U.S. and its allies when we're trying to defend interests and to defend civilians. So the question is, what could have happened that did not happen because of that if terrorism was not exported? At the same time, you can look back in 20 years and say, wow, if it's possible that it could go back to where it was before that, what have we accomplished? That's certainly a big question.
Yeah, it's a very important question. Let's talk about the Taliban. What does it now mean for the Taliban and its power in Afghanistan? Mm-hmm. Will there be consequences from the US's decision?
Sure. So what we've been talking about for a couple of years, Danica, up until last year, that the Taliban negotiations directly with the Afghan government did not happen. We've been working on that for 10 years. Only last year and the year before did they really start to pick up. So we're in a place where there was a negotiated agreement for the Taliban, with the Taliban, for the U.S. to leave actually by next month, by May. So what you're hearing already is the Taliban not saying, okay, the U.S. is leaving. They're saying the U.S. has actually violated last year's agreement, that we're leaving late, that we're already leaving a few months late. And they've already stated that the Taliban can basically now do whatever it wants to defend its interests because the U.S. broke the agreement first. So they're setting their foot down and saying that the U.S. violated it first, so whatever happens next is the U.S.'s fault. So you're already seeing that there could be consequences there. The key question will be whether the U.S., through other means, through supporting the current Afghan government, can also deter the Taliban from gaining a stronghold.
Do you think that this decision by Joe Biden suggests that in terms of the geopolitical sphere that his priorities have changed and perhaps have shifted elsewhere now?
The term I'm hearing is pragmatist, right? So Joe Biden has a long history in foreign relations. He was the chair of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. He actually publicly was opposed to the surge in Afghanistan, even when he was vice president. So this has been a long-time goal of his. So the question is, for him, not just what is he doing in Afghanistan, but just this week there's been a delegation sent to Taiwan. He brought the Japanese prime minister in, which we'll talk about, and so there are all these sort of, you would say, pragmatic events that he's supporting.
All right, well, let's talk about that. Joe Biden hosting Japan's Prime Minister in Washington, D.C. Mm-hmm. How significant is this meeting? Well,
we always talk about what is the first thing. We're right at about 100 days, plus or minus, of the administration. And who did he have sort of in person first, right? The Prime Minister of Japan. One of the reasons was, over the last 4 years, there was a lot of pressure put on Japan from the Trump administration, and people could say that the bilateral alliance deteriorated in some ways. So that's one. The first was the symbolic piece. The second is, and this is something Australians should look at, is the transcript in the press conference after the meeting, was that even though Japan and the U.S. and Australia and the U.S. have very similar views toward China and China's aggression in the region. I mean, think about the Quad that they've put together, these alliances. At the same time, the U.S. is very brazen about its critiques of China. And Japan sort of walks the line and tries to maintain, we want peace and stability in the region. Very similar to the way Australia approaches it. So the question is over the next couple of years, as we see China continue to having this movement within the region, are we going to see Australia and Japan sort of follow suit? Or is it going to be more of a, you play this role, I play this role between alliances? How
would China be viewing this meeting?
Well, of course, every time these meetings come together and they mention China, China states that we will not tolerate being contained. We will not tolerate, the growth that China will naturally have in the region and the leadership roles. So you can expect sort of those counter punches. But one of the key things that came out of it is we've talked about the company Huawei, the Chinese company,
yes.
The 5G, is that US and Japan have agreed to work together to develop 5G, sort of in a competition with Huawei. So that was interesting.
Jason Israel, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you for joining me this afternoon.
Thanks for having me, Danica.
All right. Joining me now live is my colleague, Kieran Gilbert. Kieran, what can we expect on Afternoon Agenda today?
Danica, it's been a big day on the defence front. I'm not sure we would have expected that, knowing that the vaccines and the National Cabinet have been really front of mind for many of us. But this defence announcement, one, that there'll be a Royal Commission into veteran suicide announced by the Prime Minister in the last half hour. I'll be speaking to the Minister for Veterans, Darren Chester, also the Shadow Minister for Defence, Brendan O'Connor. And then from both of them, the reaction to confirmation by Peter Dutton that that meritorious citation, unit citation to the Special Forces, it was meant to be revoked under the CDF's response to the Brereton report. Well, now that's not happening. So we've got reaction on that front too. Also, we'll try and preempt what the National Cabinet will come up with. My colleague Andrew Clennell has been there with the PM at that news conference. A full wrap-up, all the latest Afternoon Agenda after the break.
OK, all that and more coming up shortly. Kieran, see you soon. And that is where our Sky News on Win viewers leave us. If you are watching on Foxtel, Afternoon Agenda is coming up after the break.